Welcome to the first episode of Last Night a Rave Saved My Life. In this first episode, I dissect key moments in my life to see what has led me to be an entrepreneur and delve into the dance music scene. From being the only South Asian in my primary school, on a white working class council estate, living in homeless shelters, mental health, and being with a youth project in my teenage years. This episode serves as an extension from the introduction of the podcast to give a brief overview of myself. I understand this episode can be quite heavy in terms of my experiences, though I felt like it was important to touch on these as an introduction to give you an indication of why I have the drive to do what I do. The reason why I feel so comfortable speaking about these experiences is because it's so far from where I am right now, almost like I'm telling someone else's story. To help me understand these key moments and talk about certain topics, I have invited Brian Quinn. Brian was a youth worker I met at the age of 12 in school and has been a pivotal role model and mentor to me since then. Welcome, Brian Quinn.
Hello, how are you, Nico? Yeah, I'm
good, thank you. I'm excited to get into my first podcast.
Yeah, it's a whole new world. Yeah,
we've got a decent setup here. I hope it sounds good for all the listeners locked in right now. I've just read you to the introduction. I've told you a bit about where I want to take it and try to understand myself of how I've got into the music scene. Just before we started, Brian was just saying, I spoke about how maybe that coming from a predominantly white area might have affected me being involved in dance music, because the crowd right now in dance music, well, maybe just the dance music that I promote and listen to has been more of a predominantly white crowd. And you were saying that maybe it wasn't like that.
Well, I know that when I was a lot younger, when I was 21, that's when I first sort of like hit the rave scene. And back then it was all really organic. It was sort of like it probably been going 2 years before I actually got into it.
What year was that? 90s?
Early 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, early 90s. Don't want to give too much away. I've already given me age away. Right, okay. So in the early 90s, the crowd, I don't know if it's because I'm from Leicester, but the crowd always seemed really mixed.
Really?
Really mixed. So, and I don't know if it's because of the crowd that I used to sort of like hang about with, well, still hang about with.
Yeah, I think I met a few of your friends as well.
Yeah, we're a very mixed group.
Okay.
So I'm probably I'm probably the minority in the group.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm Scottish. I'm white Scottish fella. The majority of my friends are either dual heritage or from African descent.
What area was that in Leicester?
I lived in. I went to 10 different schools.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I've lived in a lot of different areas in Leicester.
Okay.
But the predominant area, I'd say, is Belgrave and Beaumont Leys.
Yeah, it's crazy that, because I guess the dance music crowds now, it's just totally not like that. So what kind of genres were playing at the rave back then?
It was all sort of like, the stuff that I was really into was sort of like the original Ibiza sort of music.
Okay.
And then the sort of like drum and bass sort of began to influence the music.
Breaks.
Yeah, and then it sort of like, when that sort of happened, the vibe changed. I think it got a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah.
And I think I sort of like I matured a little bit and sort of like started a family, so my priorities changed.
Yeah.
Whereas like when I was younger, we'd go out on the Friday and not touch down till the Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of young people now as well, I guess. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting how that is. So I guess like for anyone listening right now, I ended up in Braunston, which is a council estate just on the outs. I guess, it still classes Leicester. If you're in Leicester, I guess you've probably heard of it or know of it. And I ended up there from the age of 7. I guess like whenever I delve into the story, there might be some things that you don't know, Brian, and there might be some things that you do know, of course. I guess one of the reasons for inviting Brian is just because I feel like he knows me a lot about my past history to kind of delve into how I've got to where I've got to. I ended up being homeless from the age of around 7 with my mum and my sister. We ended up in Curtin Lodge. I know you mentioned that your brother works there at some point. We might have crossed paths. So Curtin Lodge is a homeless shelter for women. and she met some ladies in there that were from Braunston, and they were saying, look, come to Braunston, because my mum didn't know where to go. Like, does she move back to the area of where she's from? So she's from like Highfields, like Spinney Hill, Edmonton Road area, and then she made the decision to move to Braunston, even though she didn't know anyone there, but just off the back of the people that she'd met there. So through the lady that she met in there called Tracy, she met her extended friends, and they've been her friends in Braunston ever since. They still speak now, still go around each other's houses, and then we ended up in Braunston. It's quite strange actually, because I guess like most of my happiest memories were from being in Braunston from the get-go. Like as soon as I came to Braunston, even though it was a predominantly white area, I felt straight at home straight away. I think it was more of the case of the young people. I'd never felt, even though I'd probably say Braunston to a lot of other people, especially from Black and Asian communities, they think it's racist. And I think there's like different types of racism that we'll touch on. And I guess, I've never had that. I think there's certain reasons why I've never experienced that.
It's really interesting, Nico, because, you told me a couple of days ago, you told me the story that you've just told then.
Yeah.
And I was really, really surprised, because I thought your mum was Braunston born and bred.
No. Why did you think that?
Just because how comfortable you and your family are in Braunston.
Yeah.
And, but I also think that, I think one of the main reasons for that is, I know we discussed it before, but I think the people that I've worked with and the people who I associate with from Braunston, I think it's very, very clear that once you're a Brawner, you're a Brawner. It don't matter what colour you are, black, white, yellow, green, purple, blue.
Yeah.
People from all different types of backgrounds. And I can see that really reflected well now in the community in Braunston.
Yeah.
Because the Braunston community now, we've got quite a large African presence in Braunston now. And you can see that the groups, they mix.
Yeah.
So
you've probably seen it more than me, because it's been a while since I've been to the youth club, maybe in recent years, and I've seen it be more mixed, or even predominantly young Africans.
Yeah.
Even.
And because whenever I've had contact with you when you was younger, and having contact with your mum, I definitely thought your mum was born and bred in Braunston, 100%. I don't know why that is. I think it may be because, if we was out and we bumped into each other in the street, your mum would be engaging with lots of different people, and it was almost like obviously there was a difference because the different colour in the skin, but the way that people interacted and chatted. No, I just thought your mum's always been part of that furniture.
So when we moved to Braunston, I think my mum quickly got a job at actually the school as a teacher assistant. She also had a side job at the local newsagent. So I think the combination of those two things meaning that she was well connected with a lot of people straight away. And one of the things that I think that also helped my mum and myself is there wasn't no Asian twang to our voices. Like I think that I think that definitely helped a lot. So let's say, for example, I could be wrong, but let's say another family moved to Braunston, and you could tell that they're from an Asian background, and they might have spoke with more of an Indian accent. I'd think, how are they gonna fit in here?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It makes 100% sense, because I've got a friend. He was born in Leicester.
Yeah.
He's from a South Asian background.
Yeah.
And he's got a real sort of like South Asian twang to his accent.
Yeah.
And he's never moved out of Leicester.
Yeah.
He was schooled in Leicester.
Yeah.
But he's still got the twang in his accent.
Yeah.
And I find that really strange, especially when you meet him and you think, you're born and bred in Leicester. How come you've got an accent?
Maybe they've just been around South Asians this whole time, especially if you're from those communities, then you're always going to speak in your mother tongue.
Yeah, yeah.
But I guess being from Braunston, I picked up maybe the Braunston accent straight away, a very Leicester accent. My mum speaks fluent English as well. She used to speak English to us as kids. That's why we don't speak Punjabi or Gujarati.
Do you not speak?
I don't speak. I only speak English. Imagine that.
I'm shocked. I really am shocked.
I'm gutted. I have to say I'm gutted. Like, I'd love to be able to speak Gujarati and Punjabi, because it would have been I can speak to. I guess the most important thing for me was my grandparents when they were alive.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have one grandma now, and I'm lucky that she actually does speak very, very good English. But yeah, like, other than that, like, yeah, I am gutted about it.
See, I'm really surprised with that, because I think the majority of my Indian and South Asian mates, they're all bilingual.
Yeah, I don't think I know another South Asian that can't speak another language.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think that's anything to do with being brought up in Braunston then?
I think it just comes down to my mum and my dad always spoke English to me.
Yeah.
But apart maybe from Braunston's, like, finding myself home in Braunston and delving into the Braunston community, I felt like I just picked up their culture a lot, and I welcomed it a lot into my life.
It's really interesting, that is, Nico, because I'm a Glaswegian. I'm from Scotland. I was born in Scotland and I lived there till I was 5.
Okay.
And then when we came to Leicester, I had an experience in a shop once, and a grown man told me to go back to my own country. And I was 5. And I quickly learned how to speak with a Leicester accent.
Yeah. It could be the case that I felt like I had to fit in.
Yeah.
But I've always felt like my mum and my dad were very westernised. They're not very religious. My mum tries to be now, but when we was younger, we never really used to go. We never used to pray, go to the temple or anything like that. And I think like a lot of these things in the podcast contribute to the way I am now. I think that's how it's going to lead to, but I'm not too sure yet. But yeah, so I ended up in Braunston, and then I was the only South Asian in my school as well, so I went to Queensmead. I never really felt anything about it then. The only time I did notice that I was South Asian was when a lot of Turkish people moved to Leicester. So, you know, when the kebab shops started opening around Harbour Road, and there was a kid that joined our school. His name was Omar. And the teachers went, Nico, look after him. I was like, what? I was like, why me? Obviously, you know, like, I was like, yeah, it's clearly because the colour of my skin. But like, I didn't understand why. Yeah, I still don't get why me. But yeah, well, yeah, I do really. But it was strange because I felt like I didn't know how to contribute to making him feel welcome. Yeah. And it got to the point actually where we actually used to fight. I got in trouble for fighting him because he was just going around on a mad one, didn't know how to speak English, just getting in trouble with himself. And then we got into a fight, and they took me away from him in the end. But yeah, that was the first time where I thought I stood out then, where I wasn't just like everyone else because they matched me up with the new kid that was from a different country. Yeah,
that's really interesting. And it's really interesting that somebody who's in a position of power can make an assumption that because your skin colour is different to the rest of the schools, you'd be more able to connect with somebody who couldn't speak English.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it speaks a million words, don't it?
Yeah. I guess the only other time as well, but I never really thought that deep into it, was in primary school. You know, when we used to do plays and things like that. So it was a play of Diwali, and you got the character of Rama and Sita. They picked me to be Rama.
Who did they pick to be Sita?
Well, I had to be a white girl because there was no other South Asians apart from my sister. But that was it. So it was, I guess, like going from primary school to not junior school to secondary school rather. So go from junior to secondary. That was the first time that I felt that I'd seen other South Asians like in my classes, and that was really strange, like trying to connect with them. And I guess I was thinking about this the other day. Actually, I actually quite struggled connecting with them because they used to take the mick a little bit. Well, not a little bit, or a lot. Like, even though I was in their friendship group, I was in my friendship group from Braunston. I used to have little pockets of people. I got along with everybody. But when I used to chill with them, there was definitely like a lot of like jokes about me being a coconut as such. So a coconut just being brown on the outside and white on the inside. So that I felt like I struggled. I wouldn't say I struggled because like I never take anything to heart as a joke. Like being from Broadston, we take the mick out of each other all the time. It's just a thing. I think if you maybe it's just part of growing up, or maybe it's a thing in Broadston, but we're quite harsh on each other when we're taking the mick. So when these guys were taking the mick, like I guess I didn't think that it would affect me. But now, like when I'm older, I feel like it does, because I feel like when I speak to people that are also South Asian, conscious of the way they view me as well, just because of how they was in school, even though they were friends. But yeah, that was my experience in school as such. And then I guess that's where I met you at the age of 12. I remember a youth club. It didn't last long, but you could only go if you was in year 11. Somehow I ended up in there. I think I tried to sneak in or something, or I just ended up loitering about. And
was that in school?
Yeah, that was in school. Yeah. Like, yeah, I can remember the corridor, exactly where the room was, this youth club. And then I met Grant. You remember Grant?
Grant's one of my close friends.
Yeah, so Grant used to head up the youth project at the school, and I didn't actually know he was close friends. I met Callum, Dilesh, or maybe I didn't meet Callum there. I think it was Dilesh. I was quite close to Dilesh in there. So Dilesh was also South Asian, if you couldn't tell by the name. And that youth club then introduced me to you at the age of 12. Was it called Street Vibe then?
It was called Street Vibe. And
it wasn't called Street Vibe Youth Inclusion Project.
No,
was it just Street Vibe?
Just Street Vibe, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess talk to me about when you first met me, because I don't remember that much. All I can remember was just being part of this, just meeting up with you. But I don't know whether the explain about what the different sides of a youth project first. So I know you got youth affairs, detached, and outreach.
Yeah.
But I'd say if I was to describe them, which I'm probably not going to get it right.
No, go on.
Youth affairs is about giving young people, giving them the power to make decisions that affect them.
Spot on.
Is that spot on?
Spot on.
Okay. Yeah. Detached is working with them face to face, like just your normal sessions. But I don't know the outcome of that, so you might have to delve into that. And then I know outreach is working on specific themes such as sexual health. That's the one that really sticks in my mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, well, the first time I met you, Nico, was I was employed by Street Vibe as a youth affairs coordinator. So my job was to set up a thing called the Braunston Youth Panel.
Yeah. And
so what my spec was, I needed to make contact with all the existing youth provision that fed into Braunston. And I wanted one or two young people from each of the established youth provisions to come together and form a panel of decision makers that could develop the youth affairs project in Braunston, and thus raise the voice of young people in Braunston. And that was on the back of we had one of the local councillors, her name was Anne Glover.
Yeah.
She had the amazing foresight to insist that when Braunston got the New Deal for Communities money, which was funding aimed at the most deprived areas across England, and Braunston was able to apply for and receive 59.8 million over a 10-year period.
Yeah, that started in 97.
Yes, I think it would, but Street Vibe started in 2000.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, but and the main difference between the way that Braunston New Deal for Communities ran and the way that other New Deal for Communities ran across the country is that the Braunston people decided that they wanted to manage their own funding.
Okay.
So in other cities, that money was sort of like given to the local authority, and the local authority managed it.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it is really interesting, because what it actually did, it gave the local people the opportunity to direct where that money was spent and how it was spent.
I guess they're going to know best as well.
Yeah. And as I say, Anne Glover, she was she still is a great champion for young people.
Massively.
Yeah, and she had the insight when that money was allocated. She insisted, I think she might have been the chair of the board at that point, she insisted that as much be spent on young people services as what was going to be spent on diverting people from crime and antisocial behaviour.
Wow.
And she was always a very, very big believer in putting young people first. So
I think she's changed Bronson in a big way.
100%, Nico. I'd have to say she's one of my inspirations. She's a working class woman. She's got a very good sort of like community feel within her heart, and that just oozes out. And I've worked with her for nearly 18 years. She's been a big part of developing Street Vibe as a project, but as I say, more importantly, she's a big believer in young people being at the centre of whatever we do, because her belief is that young people, they're going to be our legacy.
Yeah.
So long after we're gone, the young people that we've invested in, they'll then be making the right decisions for their communities.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that was a big part of the New Deal for Communities development in Braunston. So so I was tasked to put together the youth panel. So I went to the uniform services, so the cadets, scouts. I went to the school provisions, which you came from. You came from Fulhurst.
Yeah.
The youth offending service. We wanted young people that were at risk of or already involved in offending behaviour. And also the statutory provision, so the provision that was run by the council.
Okay.
But what we found in Braunston is that when the money was allocated and the community decided that they were going to manage this project themselves, so they recruited people from... They were informed by professionals, but they had a board that were made up of residents.
Okay.
So, and those residents made big decisions about where the money was going to be spent.
And did they then decide that we wanted... That's how Street Vibe came about then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And when Street Vibe came about, they wanted a youth project. Well, what they did, they got a research project was brought in from De Montfort University, their youth affairs branch at De Montfort University. They done some research in the area, and because the New Deal for Communities wanted the way that the youth provision was being directed, they wanted it well informed by research.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just, we want a youth centre.
Yeah.
And the outcome of that was that the recommendations from the youth affairs were that they look at developing a youth centre. That youth centre also had to have an outreach part of it. And the way that we developed that is that Street Vibe brought a bus.
Yeah.
Kitted it out so it was an all singing, all dancing youth bus.
Yeah.
They also wanted a detached element to it. Sorry, before I go on to talk about detached, the idea behind the outreach youth bus was that would give other providers that currently didn't have a office or somewhere to work for in Braunston.
Yeah.
So the idea was that it was going to open up new services for young people in Braunston.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that you said that you identified outreach with sexual health.
Yeah.
Because the partnership between the Street Vibe project and the NHS Choices sexual health project, that was the most long-standing partnership arrangement that we had in place.
That's probably why I remember it.
Yeah. And it's probably one of the most successful projects that we ran with any other sort of agency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, going from like when you first started, I guess like it just kind of like put a signal in my head just in terms of, so when I was in junior school and primary school, I'd like to say I was very attentive to learning. I was always great at maths. I was pretty good in English as well. And I actually did a test to get in Leicester Grammar School and I passed it, and it meant my mum didn't have to pay for it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I refused to go. Imagine that.
Why did you refuse to go?
Because I felt so happy in my school and with the people that I knew. And I didn't want to lose my friends.
Right. Okay. That's.
So touching on that is like before I moved to Braunston, I was bullied as a kid. I can't remember any good memories of school prior to the age of 7. So going into a school where I felt super comfortable, made loads of friends. I lost my stutter at the time because I used to have a really bad stammer as well when I was younger before I moved to Braunston. So I just felt like a lot of things changed moving to Braunston. So that takes me up until junior school. I refused to go to Leicester Grammar School, and I moved to Fulhurst. And in Fulhurst, I guess at the age of around 11 and 12, and I guess it's quite an important part of growing as a young man, I think, and really understanding. I don't know what kind of growth it is, but I just know it's an important part. And I guess didn't know that how much I might have needed street vibe then, because I've tried to think about street vibe if I didn't have street vibe in my life and what that would mean and the kind of person that I am. Because for anyone listening, like, street vibe was a huge part of my life. Like, I'd really dedicated a lot of time to it, to the youth club, going to the youth club every week and just being part of the project as a whole. I felt like I was always in communication with you guys. I always used to be around in the youth club, and at a time when things were there's always certain elements of stress with my mum, because my mum's a single parent, money coming in, always arguing with my sister, not realizing why you don't have certain things because we didn't have a lot of money coming in, and the frustration of I guess just having a single mum as well, like not having a dad around. And I felt that having the youth project in my life gave me focus on something to distract me from a lot of things that could be stresses and a lot of discerning things that could have a negative effect on my life, from always being around you and being a positive role model to being part of the youth project as a whole. I think it definitely plays a key part in just being able to even articulate myself sometimes, because going from having a stammer and not speaking to anyone to now obviously doing what I do with B-Swang and the record label and just the whole process in my adult life, I feel like that's had a huge impact. So going from school to being involved in the project, I definitely think like it probably got worse from when I was around 14, 15. I think that's when my mum got ill. Actually, she started to get hernias, and I think she lost a job around that time as well, when we was around 14, 15 as well. So around the age of 15, I believe, we lost the council house because it was on housing association. So housing association is where a landlord gives their property to the Leicester City Council and say you can house tenants in there. But with me and my sister young, like, we didn't know anything about it whatsoever. We just think, oh, we're in a house and we're going to stay here forever. But yeah, the landlord ended up, when the lease was coming to an end, he wanted to, I think there was a certain period where like he could say, right, I want to sell the house now. And he made that decision and we had to move out in 3 months. And that was just going before year 11, I think. So I was doing my GCSEs at that time. And that's when I think things started to get real stressful for me at school around that time. I think being in the school at Fulhurst, there's loads of distractions anyway. Obviously, there would have been positives to go to Leicester Grammar School, of course, great education, probably good teachers. But yeah, there was a lot of things that were going through. I guess like we used to get drunk on the park and just mess about. I wasn't really focused on education. Going from being well into my maths and my English to getting drunk on the park all the time and just socialising with friends, I guess it would have been a completely different life. And I think things got a lot worse when we found that we had to move out, because that was the point when we was homeless again. So we had to go. We ended up back in Curtin Lodge when we was 15. And I think for me and my sister, like, that was a real shocker for us, because I don't know what the word is to describe it, but going back to somewhere where you was when you were younger, you don't associate that with good times. Me and my sister, I think we went we took it really badly. So me and my sister used to argue all the time anyway, but then I remember at that point we used to be pretty bad.
I can't believe what you're telling me.
What do you mean?
I just can't believe it, because I remember that time. I distinctly remember the time when you had to move out of your house.
So at that time, imagine that I've been involved with the youth project and being involved in youth affairs and the whole rest of it. I felt like the first time that I actually came to you guys, and especially Mary as well. Remember Mary, the youth worker. I felt like that was the first time where I actually turned to you guys and like, guys, like, I don't know what to do. I didn't know how I conveyed the message. I remember sitting down with Mary one time and speaking about it, just because I felt so stressed out, so sad, so confused, of just being moved around again, especially going to the point where you have to go back into a hostel because it's just why. That's the question that you always ask yourself, like, why are we in this position? So then we had to move out and we moved back to Curtin Lodge, and Curtin, we was there for, I think we was there for about 3-4 months, probably longer to be fair. And one of the things that I remember was they didn't want to let us in because I'm an older male at this point. I wasn't a young kid. And because it's a women's refuge, a women's hostel, they didn't want other women to be upset because I was probably a bit taller then as well. Like, I looked like a teenager. So yeah, they wasn't going to let us in. So my mum had to like persuade them like massively. They had to meet me just to show that I wasn't just going to cause havoc in there. But yeah, they ended up accepting us. And I remember my sister being out all the time because she didn't want to stay there. I didn't want to stay there. I just wanted to be at friends' houses all the time and stay over there. And they finally relocated us to another house in Braunston. I'm glad we chose Braunston again, actually. I think my mum really fought for that because I felt like the options that they're giving us wasn't in Braunston. But somehow, like, I remember that actually. I think my mum really did fight for it. And this was closer to the school at this time. So we used to walk like 20 minutes to school every day. Now it's just literally around the corner, just off Winstanley Drive, Elmsford. And then after that, I remember that year at, I can remember not wanting to be at Curtin Lodge so bad that when they allocated the house, imagine the house was no carpet, no curtains. It looked like, I can't even describe it to you. There was just nothing in there whatsoever. No kitchen. I actually just put a mattress in there in the living room and just slept in the house.
Wow.
Yeah. Just on the floor. I just put window lean. You know window lean?
Yeah.
I just put window lean on the windows and I slept in there for a few weeks just because I didn't want to be at Curtin Lodge. I think that just the negative impact of being back in a hostel was just too much for me.
And as well, it's such an important time in your life.
Doing my GCSEs.
Yeah, you're doing your GCSEs. You know, your friends mean everything to you.
Yeah.
And you're being ripped away from all of that.
Yeah, I think it did really throw me off course.
Yeah.
Massively, in a big way. I remember doing my GCSEs that year and I just felt like I was really out of focus a lot.
I wasn't aware that you'd moved back to Curtin Lodge.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because when I was younger, I lived in Border House twice, which is a family refuge.
Yeah, I've heard of Border House.
Yeah, and I was also there when I was about 7. And then I was there again when I was 15.
Really?
Really?
That's crazy.
It isn't it? And you also lived at Park Lodge, didn't you?
Yeah, so we'll get onto that later on. It's crazy.
That's mad.
Yeah, crazy.
Really strange. And for people who don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about Border House is mainly it's a refuge for women and their children, and more often than not, it's because the women are fleeing domestic violence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first time around, it was like we were going into a party.
Yeah.
Because all the families shared the amenities.
Yeah. That's what it's like.
Yeah. And it were great the first time we went to Border House because it was almost like everyone was partying every night.
Yeah.
And you got to go to bed whenever you wanted. It was like free spirits. It was like a hippie commune.
Okay.
So it was great. But then when I was 15 and my mum lost the house in Beaumont Leys.
Yeah.
And to have to go with your friends to Border House to collect stuff, and it was really demoralising.
Yeah.
And I really felt I felt like I was a little bit like an imposter when I used to go back to my friends in Beaumont Leys.
Yeah.
It's almost like I didn't belong there anymore.
Yeah. That's strange.
Yeah.
I guess like when you don't want to, especially when you're 15, you don't want to be associated with living in a hostel, I guess.
No, definitely not.
Not in front of your friends and all the rest of it, but I guess it's just something that you go through. I think I guess it's one of the frustrations that you have when you're a teenager, going through something like that and all the negative impacts that it has. But yeah, so then I was struggling in school back then. The only reason, so I ended up failing English at GCSE. I got a D and I had to retake it at college to get a C. But I got my C's in maths, science, and I got 2 B's in art and design. And the only reason I passed science and maths was because that group of Indian friends, they knew I was struggling, and my coursework, they knew I wasn't going to do it. They did it for me.
Wow.
Yeah, they did it for me, and I got A's. I got A's in my coursework. I don't know if I should be saying this, but I got A's in my coursework. They said, Nico, like, we've done your coursework for you, just write the conclusion. So I wrote the conclusion from all, got A's in my coursework, and then when I got to my exams, I didn't do that well in my sums, but because I did well in my coursework, it brought my level to a C.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful that they did that, because that led me to be able to get a good first job when I left school. So when I left school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I guess I was always interested in art and design. I did art and design at school, so I did that at college level. So I went to Gateway College and I did that for 2 years. I struggled with that. I never really handed any coursework in, really messing about. I guess just not really paying attention or anything like that. I was just going for the sake of it. Sometimes I wouldn't even turn up. And then I got a job at HMRC when I was 17. So one of my friends applied for a job at HMRC, and it was 25 hours a week, and it was over £10 an hour pay. So when you're 17,
that's good pay.
I was getting EMA at that time as well, £30 a week. That was very, very good pay. So I was like, right, I'm going to apply for this job 5 to 10 every day after college. I was like, that's the perfect time. So I applied for the job. Luckily, I just passed my GCSE after my first year at college in English. So you need your C's in science, English, maths and science, I believe. And then I got that job, and I think that job changed my life massively straight away. So straight away, my first paycheck, I bought a 42-inch TV. My mum was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? She was fuming that I did that. But after that, I bought a driving license straight away. I got a car. And then I guess that was my main focus, because I wasn't really that interested in art and design as such. I was good at it, but I never really applied myself. And then I think this was actually a period of when I actually went to college, I was less involved in Street Vibe, I think it was like when I left school around the ages of 16, 17, I was probably less involved with the project. And then I left college and I remember speaking to you actually about it, because I used to speak to everyone about it. Do I go to university? And I guess everyone was pushing me to go to university and do, I guess the obvious thing right back then would have been to do a year foundation in art and design and just go for it and see what happens off the back of it. But I just felt, because I didn't do well in college level, like I just knew my motivations for it just wasn't there. And I just knew if I went there, it would just be a totally waste of time. And I felt like getting to university level, it's a big deal. Like, it's a big decision. Not like college, like everyone goes to college and school. But yeah, I decided not to, and I carried on with my work at HMRC. But that was only for a limited period of time. And once I finished there, it was at the same time as when I moved into Park Lodge. So around the ages of around 19, I had a breakdown with a relationship with my mum. And her boyfriend at the time, and I don't really want to go into it too much, but it got to the point where like I had to leave the house. And so when I left the house, I ended up in Park Lodge, which is a young people's hostel just off Clarendon Park Road. And it was at the point where just before that I lost my job as well, so I had to sell everything. I sold my car, all my belongings. I didn't really have anything. Didn't have no money coming in as well. So going into Park Lodge, that was quite a difficult time. I think, again, like you ask yourself why am I in this position again?
Can I ask, when you went into Park Lodge, did you have your own room?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So Park Lodge, they have their main building, where all the staff are. and I had because they have outhouses as well. So an outhouse is where there's no staff. It's just like a normal house, but there's CCTV in all the rooms apart from your bedroom. So in the hallways, in the kitchen, in the back garden, which is then monitored from the main building. But they said they can't move into one of those outhouses. They need to see how I behave first in the main building. So I was only in the main building for a week before they put me in an outhouse. I think they realised that I wasn't going to cause a havoc or be any trouble or anything like that. This was actually the time I had a girlfriend at the time who I was super attached to. So she was very middle class. Her mum used to look after me a lot. Like, I experienced a lot of things in that relationship just in terms of whole different quality of lifestyle. She was my first girlfriend at the time as well. So just things about like just eating at a dinner table, cooking, like the food was amazing all the time. So growing up with food, like it was just a lot of, I'd probably describe it as Iceland food, like turkey drummers and spaghetti hoops, and I guess it's great throwback food, but it wasn't. I think like when me and my sister were teenagers, like there was just a point where it was like, yeah, we're cooking ourselves when we was able to. But yeah, so I was really attached to this girlfriend at the time, and I remember she broke up with me when she went to uni, and that cut me deep at that time. I think it's because I was living in the hostel and I didn't really have anyone to lose that person that I had a great connection with, and I was so close to her family because I used to stay there all the time. Again, so when I lived at the hostel, I'd probably say like about half of that time I stayed at her house, even though you wasn't meant to. And then I had a real bad time when she split up with me, and then I guess they moved me into a flat, so they relocated me off London Road. And also as well, let me rewind to actually when you live in a hostel, you have to apply for housing benefit.
Yeah. And
when you apply for housing, your housing benefit just goes straight to the hostel, and you have to apply for a job seekers allowance. Mm-hmm. But the strange thing that I could never get my head around was if you apply for job seekers allowance and you get a job, you had to pay for then the cost of the hostel.
Yeah, it's not changed. It's still the same.
But I don't understand how. So let's say, for example, you're applying for job seekers, you get a job, and it's worse than minimum wage. It's agency. You're all young people as well, so you're getting a minimum wage. I guess at that time as well, because I remember my first job at NatWest after I moved out of the hostel, agency wage, full-time, £800 a month. And the cost of the hostel was £800 a month.
Yeah.
So how are you meant to live?
Well, young people today still face the same dilemma.
Yeah.
It's almost like you've got no incentive whatsoever to get a job whilst you're in a hostel.
No.
Which is such a shame.
So imagine that I passed my GCSEs and I felt like I had the qualifications to apply for a lot of the jobs, but I couldn't apply for them. So I was just stuck pretending to apply for jobs, being on job seekers allowance, but I couldn't do anything about it until I got to the point of I managed to, when they relocated me to a new house, a flat off London Road, I was like, right, like I can get a job straight away. I remember I had an interview at HSBC and I didn't get it. I got a job for an agency at NatWest and I got the job, and it was £800 a month. And when I started getting paid £800 a month, my income just went all on bills, and it got to the point where the money that I had left over was the same amount that I was getting on job seekers.
Yeah,
I was left with about £100 and something a month to spend on food. Yeah, that wasn't even including food or my bills. That was the rent. The gas was high because it was single pane windows.
Yeah,
I remember it was absolutely freezing in there. I never used to put the gas on, even though like it was a nice flat. Like I felt, I'd definitely say that's probably the lowest point in my life. And
so did you continue to work?
I continued to work. I can just remember having a real bad time.
Yeah.
Just because I wasn't getting any real good money coming in.
Yeah.
My bills were adding up. I wasn't paying my bills. I wasn't paying my council tax. I was young then because I didn't know anything about all of this. Like I was just landed with it straight away, saying, you've got to pay this, you've got to pay that. And that was quite difficult to deal with. And at this time as well, like all my friends were at university. So they're all at university working, and moving away from Broughton as well, that was quite hard because living around London Road, I had no one, and because I've always been quite social, then to being on my own, obviously I just split with my girlfriend. Yeah, like I was at a real bad point then, and I guess that was at the point where I ended up I tried to take my own life back then, which I don't think a lot of people knew, but I guess I'm trying to think. When you're alone, I think that's probably one of the scariest things. Loneliness, I think, when you're left with your thoughts too much, or you just feel like you don't have anyone as such, because I wasn't around my mum or my family or anything like that, and you just stuck in the world of everyone's doing something or got something else going on, but I didn't have any direction or anything. I didn't really know what I was doing at all. And again, just being in a cold flat, like, because you can't afford your bills. I remember that time actually, like I didn't have enough money when I first moved into there. I remember I had loads of tin food, and I didn't even have a tin opener to open the food to eat. And that was that again, like things like that. That's I feel like that's quite triggering to poor mental health. I look back now and I think, so even when I talk about it, I think that doesn't seem like my life. Like it doesn't feel like that was my life. Speaking about it, it's quite strange. Maybe because I'm so far away from that now.
Yeah.
Obviously,
it's a pivotal point in your life, though. I think
massively. So like when I did try to take my own life, afterwards I ended up in hospital. And
can I ask how you did that? Because I've known you for many years, Nico, and this is the first time I'm hearing this.
Of course. I think it was at the time when like I wasn't involved in street vibe a lot then in those years, and I basically just took a load of tablets. I think I took like 30-40 tablets, and I had to be put on a drip. Turns out I'm allergic to penicillin. And the penicillin nearly killed me in hospital as well.
Wow.
Yeah. And the only thing that saved me right then, because I remember being in a room, being on this drip, and as soon as they put me on it, they left. And I told my friend I was in there, and straight away when they put it in, I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed. I couldn't speak, and my skin, instant sweating. I've never seen anything like it. I couldn't speak. I couldn't shout for anyone. And I was in a corner where they couldn't see me, what was going on. Luckily, my friend literally come round the corner, seen me, called a nurse, and they ripped it out straight away. That's crazy.
I'm really shocked.
Yeah.
I'm shocked to hear that now.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you've not shared that with me before.
Yeah, it's quite a personal thing, I guess.
Yeah,
and I guess like a lot of things, I guess the preconception of a lot of people that meet me in my life is that, especially being South Asian, is you've had a good life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's people don't know a lot. I don't let a lot of things off. It's like people. I think I kind of like that in a way.
Yeah. Can I ask who the friend was?
Wade Ball.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Wade's responsible for you being sat here today.
Yeah.
Good on you, Wade.
So Wade Ball. So then I remember he was there, and later on that day I actually got discharged, and I remember coming out of the hospital, and I felt so strange, like very, very odd. Wade wasn't there at that time. He'd left, and I remember walking out and going to a cafe, Ravioli's on Welford Road.
Yeah.
And I remember just sitting in there thinking, did that just happen? Like, and I think at that point right then, there's a film that I love. It's my number one film, Shawshank Redemption. Have you seen it?
Yes. So, more than a few times, Nico.
Yeah, so it's my favourite film. Like, as soon as I've seen it, like, it's always been my number one film. And there was a point in that film where everyone thinks he's just about to kill himself, and he says, you either get busy living or you get busy dying.
Yes.
And that's a tattoo that I've got on my forearms.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. So it was that point, that thing really stuck in my head. And it was like, well, you can either mope around, get busy dying, or you can get busy living.
So was that Morgan Freeman who was talking to
Andy Dufresne?
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
And I think at that point in my life, I just felt that you really just have two decisions. You can't be stuck in the middle. And if I was gonna live, then you really have to make the most of it and really do try. And I feel like that I think that realization then is, well, what do you want to do? You have to go full force all the time, every single day, and really try to change your life. So when we first decided that I wanted to put on an event. So we'd just been going to Nottingham and Sheffield all the time. And then I looked at Leicester and I was like, why is there no underground music scene here? I felt like Leicester was a big enough city for something to happen. I felt like there was enough people here. And then I felt like all I needed to do, I felt like I always had a bit of business acumen in me and the willingness to learn part of it. And a lot of people that get into it, I guess they're always a DJ first. I wasn't a DJ at this time. I wasn't a rep for anyone else. I wasn't involved in the nightclub scene in any other way or the music scene. I was just a raver. So then I researched into it quite a lot, and then I put on my first event, and it was just all friends of friends. You're talking 100 people, and then I think it just kind of just grew from there. Like you just work, you learn from your mistakes, and gradually over the course of it's 8 years now. I'm able to make money from it, and I guess it only ever started to make money from it after about 4 or 5 years, which is a long time, like, to kind of stick at something. It was making money, but not like enough to live off. It's for a full-time wage.
It's interesting you're saying that, Nico, because since I've started my own little business, I'm 3 years in now, and forget about the coronavirus. Before that hit, I've never made no money from my business either. But they say I think the first 5 years, if you make any money from any business, you're very, very fortunate.
A lot of people do say that, and I think the reason probably why I stuck at it was just because I felt so passionate about it. I don't know why. Probably because I think the reason why I'm passionate about it is because I understood the escapism of an event and dance music, and because that was so important to me, and that distracted me from all my negative personal things that were going on in my life. Having that escapism, if I can share this with people in Leicester, I thought that was such an amazing thing. And I've always been a big music head. Like throughout my whole life, I've always collected music, even though I wasn't a DJ. So I'd probably say that was a big factor of, I guess me talking about it maybe explains a bit easier, but like sharing that whole escapism experience with new people is exactly what I want to do, and perfecting that over a period of time. So like going from the first event with just friends of friends, it wasn't like what it is now. There's no big event or large scale lighting production and shy effects and chasing status. It was just about getting something going and starting. Cheap entry, it used to be like £1 to £3, sometimes a £5. And for a long time, it was just friends of friends. And then it started to build up. And then the friends started coming less. And it was just people that I've heard about and picked up on about it. And then I guess if I tried to refer back to the title of the podcast, I think just maybe from your opinion, like what is there certain elements that you think that have led me to put on events as such? Because when I think about it myself, like a big thing for me I don't know why it is, maybe it's completely not, but coming from Braunston, so the crowd at our events is predominantly white, and I guess dance music, even though dance music deprives from black culture, in recent years it has been predominantly white. And I think one of the reasons for that is because genres change that haven't. So let's say, for example, in black working class communities, that's where drum and bass and jungle kind of was built. And the same thing for, let's say, for example, with UK garage, very urban. The crowds were probably more urban than there was definitely no white people, well, majority white people. So where it's kind of turned into where the music coming out of the streets right now, I'd probably say it's more drill like than anything. In hip hop, UK hip hop, the crowd right now is predominantly white, which I think is, I think that's the reason why it is. But I don't know whether me being from Braunston contributes to me being involved in raves. Like, let's say, for example, if my mum didn't choose Braunston, have I still had the same experiences and delved into dance music the way I do? Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but how do you define that pathway though?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing. Yeah. I might not ever be able to define it. And I guess leading me to, I guess there's going to be loads of different, I think it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to find it. It's just probably exploring different key moments that have led me to it. And I think maybe going back to my mum choosing Braunston could definitely have been one. It might not have been one. I might have always been driven to dance music later on in life. Maybe it's the fact of always when my mum left my dad, I think it kind of gave me the ability to express myself however I wanted to express myself. And my mum not being a strict Asian, like I felt like that could contribute to me delving into dance music. I've been speaking about this with my partner PJ actually. So PJ is also known as Yumna Black, the producer that some of you might know. And he's also South Asian, because then he's has been brought up around a lot of Asians. But he's involved in dance music. So I guess the thing that we kind of spoke about was, could it be the case of our parents or just our upbringing gave us the ability to express ourselves how we wanted to, which has led us to dance music. So we wasn't like driven into being a doctor or an accountant or something like that.
Yeah.
Because I've spoke about the PJ and I asked him like, what was your parents like growing up? And he was like, I've always felt like he could always express himself however he wanted. I guess there's other reasons why he was involved in dance music. He said his neighbour used to love metalheads and Goldie and drum and bass and things like that. So we got involved in that from a young age. But when we look at Leicester as a whole, we don't see, even though I guess in the early 2000s, garage events were predominantly Asian. But right now, still the crowd is predominantly white, a lot of young white students. You get the odd South Asian in there, but it's very strange to see. But I guess we feel that it's important for us to be at the front how we are DJing, so hopefully it invites other more South Asians or just even anyone of colour just to feel like they can come to the event. But that hasn't really changed so much. But I guess one thing that we do point it down to was being able to express yourselves and how your parents channel you in certain areas, I think, because I feel like dance music is synonymous for being able to express yourself, and that's how we make that connection. I don't know what you think to that.
Yeah, I take your point, and I agree with it.
Yeah.
I know that when I first found the dance music scene, I was among a collective of South Asians and West Indians. And we used to go over to Nottingham and we used to go to a club called Venus. Now, Venus at that time was the club in the country for dance music. And so that's how I first experienced it. And one of the group that I used to go clubbing with, he then started DJing. And I always remember that he had the midnight slot at Venus on New Year's Eve one year. And that just took it to a whole different level, being around that. And I think Leicester as a place, I think being South Asian or being from India, it's the opportunity to do a lot of things. I feel that you get more opportunity in Leicester than you may do elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's.
And I think you can look at there's different community projects and businesses that have built themselves up over time.
Yeah,
and Too Funk is the one that's
massive. Yeah,
coming to the front of my head.
Yeah.
But also there used to be Formation 5 Records.
Yeah,
they used to put on a lot of raves.
Yeah.
There was also DJ SS.
Yeah,
he's from Leicester.
Yeah.
Master Safe. I know he's a white DJ, but he's shaped the music scene in Leicester when I was younger.
Yeah.
So I think Leicester's I know from your point of view when you're saying that when you was sort of first going out on the club scene, there wasn't a lot of raves out there. I think it was different for me.
Yeah, definitely. So I know a bit about the history of Leicester. I know all the raves that used to go on, all the different promoters.
Yeah.
And I know Master Safe, I know DJSO. So I don't know how something got lost within the space of a few years. But I think it was probably around. So when I started going out in 2008, I think that was kind of the last of the big raves. When I think the last raves before me, the big ones was Formation.
Yeah.
I think they were the big events then at the SUs. I think that's when like Chasing Status was first big, and Pendulum, and those kind of acts. But yeah, like I think at that point, that's when they start putting events on. But yeah, after that, there wasn't a lot of things for quite a few years. I don't believe. Well, I wasn't really. I think I went to Superfly. I don't even remember Superfly.
Yeah.
I think I went to Superfly a couple of times, and I've seen a few people there. I've seen David Rodigan at Music Cafe, actually.
Oh, right, yeah.
But
See, that David Rodigan, I only discovered that David Rodigan was white about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I've listened to him for years, and I've always thought he was Jamaican.
Yeah, well, you would do if you hadn't seen his face before.
Yeah.
He's made such a big contribution to reggae and dancehall music. It's crazy in the UK. But yeah, going back to why, I guess, maybe I'll never understand why I'm led, I've been led to it, but I guess it could be just a combination of things. So my interest in music as a general, maybe it's the need for escapism at a certain time in my life that kind of led me to my first rave as such.
But there's a big jump from attending your first rave to putting on a rave.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that your involvement with Street Vibe over, say, 5 years.
Yeah.
You engaged really quite heavily.
Yeah.
So you went from being a young person that was referred to the project to be part of a youth panel that was aiming to give voice to young people across the Braunston area. Yeah. You went from being a member of that panel to then becoming involved with the management committee, then eventually sitting on the management committee.
Yeah.
As an adult.
Yeah. I think carry on.
And I think part of that process was that you became more engaged in decision making, and I think you were a pivotal part to us designing the Youth Action Fund. Yeah. And for those that don't know what the Youth Action Fund is, what it was, we had a pot of money that was dedicated entirely to young people. So it was a pot of money that was ran by young people for young people. So we had a grant giving scheme that enabled young people to apply for between £50 and £500. So Nico was part of a group who came up with the model that we used for the Youth Action Fund, and he was also part of the group that designed the grant application. The grant applications were sent out, the applications came back, the young people would meet, they'd decide who would get funded and who wouldn't, and we had funding applications from a range of different people, from dance groups, church groups. We had a young person who wanted to go to college.
There's an application that sticks in my head actually, and I don't know it fully, but it was to do with a relationship with getting a young person involved with animals. I can't remember what the application was about, but it was a correlation between working on a farm with young people. And that was the application. Yeah. I think it was something to do with horses as well.
Oh, right, yeah.
It was just an application that stuck in my head for some random reason.
Yeah, well, we had all different types of applications, and I think altogether, throughout the whole term of the project, I think we awarded 45 different awards from between £50 and £500. And to be part of that, to be part of bringing that together and actually seeing as a young person the difference that your decision making can make in people's lives, I think that's a really big part of empowering you as a young person.
Yeah, for sure.
Then after that, you were then part of a group that we recruited to do the MVQ in youth work.
Going back to why you think all of this has led me to being able to organise events, like just from what you've just spoke about. I thought that was really interesting because I felt like the project has always given me the confidence to make decisions, and something where I've never really had before. Just, I remember this, I'm glad I remember it, because when I was involved in the youth affairs side of things and you're making decisions, and you used to put me in meetings and with councillors and people higher up at the BCA. So the BCA was the project I was managing the fund that was allocated to Braunston. And I used to say to you all the time, like, Brian, I don't understand it. I don't understand all this terminology, like, especially when we was going to like big important meetings and I was the only young person there.
Yeah.
And I think you always pushed me to just go into it and don't be afraid. And
don't be afraid to stop the meeting and say,
I don't get it.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
It's one of the most important skills I think that you can ever have.
And that's transpired massively to me because I'm always, and I say this to everyone I meet as well, don't be afraid to ask questions. And I always remember you saying that to me in my head, and I felt like that has enabled me to press forward a bit more in whatever endeavours I have in my life. But it's interesting that you link that to the being involved in the project, to making that decision to be like, I'm going to do this. Because again, like back in when we was involved in the project, it was a lot of project managing, and to have the confidence to be like, I'm going to put on a rave, I'm actually going to do it and research into it. And it actually reminds me of the times where even on my work experience, putting something together and implementing it, researching all the different parts to it. And I'm glad that, I guess that's probably one of the reasons that's led me to do what I do, or have the conviction to do what I do. I guess that's definitely one of the part of the conclusions.
The main reason that you do what you do is because of you. We all have experiences that shape us and form us. However, you're your own driving force. If you're going to do something, you'll do it.
Yeah.
And I'm a great believer in that.
Yeah.
And to see you doing what you're doing now, it puts a big smile on my face, as it does all the other youth workers that have worked with Unico.
Yeah, because I guess like it's a big journey to get to, even from a young age, from being even longer than, because it's been a long time now. It's probably been like 15 years maybe.
Well,
I'm 29 now.
You started when you was
15,
11.
So
18 years.
18 years. Wow.
Yeah.
That's been a big journey. A big journey.
Yeah.
A big difference as well from where I was. And I guess, it's been, so there's B-Swang now. We've been running for 8 years. We launched the record label last year. We opened up a bar recently, which I'm going to delve into more on another episode of the podcast. And then it's just going to carry on building and doing what we do. Like, I've always said to myself that once I'm in a position of, I don't work for the finances. Like, with whatever I do with B-Swang and Man Records and just anything that I do, even the bar, like, I always put the customer experience first, or the deliverable of our product. I always make sure that comes first over then making any profit. I think in the long run, that's what gives you the profit, but it's not the money that I think of straight away. It's like, I'm not putting on an event for money. It's never been that case. But hopefully later on in the future, I've always wanted to get back to making a positive difference in other people's lives. And I think that has always been ingrained in me from the youth work days. I feel that I'd always want to give back at some point, but I need to make sure that I'm comfortable myself first.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after anyone else.
Yeah.
That's a real important lesson.
And I've always had the conflicting thing in my life of, do I want to commit my life to being involved in youth work and the whole youth affairs side of things? And I think definitely my experiences have always trying to lead me to that. But I'm grateful that I'm in a position where I'm able to explore my business endeavours, to be able to give myself a great life and give me all the things that I never used to have as a kid.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that I moved to the area that I'm in now is because I've always wanted to move here. Because when I was a teenager, I used to look at this area and think, wow, this is a nice area.
Expand a little bit more on that, Nico.
What do you mean?
Just describe a little bit about where you live in.
So I live in a 2-bed Victorian house in Knighton. It's amazing. It's got wooden floors. It's got an open fire. It's got an Aga cooker. And I guess it was... I've lived with my mum a lot of my life, and I've lived in different places. And moving to an area like this, it was... I've achieved a lot of things in my life, but just moving into an area like this, like it felt like it was a big achievement for me. It might not be the same for a lot of people, but it's even like at the point I don't own the house, it's rented. But when I do own my house, it's going to mean such a big thing for me because it's something that no one can take away. It is mine. And obviously because I've had the experience of not really feeling safe or secure in my home, because obviously all the time that we've had to live in hostels, I feel like that's going to be a great accomplishment as well. But so when I've spoke about my whole experiences of living in hostels previously, and I spoke about it feels like someone else's life, it's because I've developed skills over the years to know that I don't think I'll ever get back to that point, just because or even if I do, I know how to get out of it, and I know that I'm comfortable, or the skill set that I have, I'm able to generate income for myself off my own back. Does that make sense?
It does, make perfect sense. How long have you been in this house, Nico?
I've been in this house for a year and a half.
A year and a half. And during that year and a half,
yeah,
where do you think you've gone creatively?
It's strange. So like at different points in my life, I'd probably say that I've got to the next level. And having my own space, obviously I lived with my mum a big period of my life. Having my own space and living how I want has enabled me to get to the next place. So just in the past year and a half, we've put on our biggest ever events. Chase the Status, Shy Effects. We've sold out all 4 rooms at the O2, 2,300 people. It's a lot of people.
You're forgetting another really massive artist that you brought to Leicester that nobody else could.
Oh, Stormzy.
Yes.
That wasn't the past year and a half though, but that has happened.
Yeah, no, but I think that's a really important statement to make, because you brought probably the biggest UK star into our city.
Yeah. That's a big achievement, and it's definitely one that if someone doesn't understand what I do for a living, I say, well, I brought Stormzy to my event, and they kind of get a bit of a gist for it. That was a huge achievement. But yeah, so let's say for example what I just spoke about is I wouldn't ever go back. Even if I did go back to the hostel, I know what I need to do to get out of it, and I definitely feel more secure because I built a skill set that I can use to generate money. So let's say for example with the whole coronavirus, it means unfortunately that I'm going to have to move out of this house, and it's definitely not something that I want to do. Obviously I'm super happy here. I've got to move back to my mum's, but I feel comfortable in knowing that when things do get back to normal, I'm able to generate money and be back in a position of what I was, to have the nicer things in life. It's one thing that you've pointed out as well, and also PJ, is that it's probably going to help me get to that next level now. Even though it seems like a step back, it's a step back to make two steps forward. And I'm actually excited to not have a huge responsibility of paying the bills that I do now, and being able to expand on the record label a bit more. So yeah, lots of good things happening. I guess I can't really complain.
No, definitely not. And also as well, one of the things that I think you've not really mentioned is that your sort of like conviction in developing the nighttime economy in Leicester.
Yeah, you know what it is? I feel like there's so many things that I want to say. It's not enough for one podcast.
Right, okay.
So there's loads of different topics that I want to talk about in the future. So definitely like Leicester's nighttime economy. I've got a lot of words to say about that. The Leicester dance music scene as a whole, and how the UK perceives dance music in Leicester, or just the fact that it's non-existent. Talking about my time with a therapist. So I've been seeing a therapist for now, 2 years, I'd say. That's something I'd like to delve in more and share about what I've learned, which I think hopefully is going to be beneficial. Yeah, lots of things to discuss. To sum up this podcast, I've enjoyed the conversation of making that link between my involvement in the youth project and decision making now, And I'd with conviction, it is the case of I wouldn't be in the position that I am now without it. And I think I'm just super grateful for obviously yourself and Street Vibe and the money that got allocated to Bronson in the first place, because I landed there at the exact right time for them service to be delivered.
Well, things happen for a reason, Nico. And that brings me on to the last bit that I'd like to say as well.
Then.
I just think that the position that you and B-Swang are in is it. When you look at the impact that the coronavirus has had on our society, particularly culture, it's going to have a massive impact on culture. When I talk about culture, I'm talking about the arts. I think you and people who are like-minded like you, you're going to be a big part in taking our society onto where we need to go. So I know you talk about you're very customer-centred, but I think the things that you do, you're giving people the chance to live a good life and to have that shared experience, and they're given that chance without the feeling of any difference.
So let's say, for example, when I look at some of the positives of how B-Swang affects people's lives. So one of the reasons why I also wanted to put on events was because I wanted to bring like-minded individuals together. So it wasn't just the case of people from Leicester. I used to meet people that were young people at university that didn't have anywhere to go and they wasn't having a great uni experience. So since then, I've been able to connect people, not just like a couple of people. Now it's getting to the thousands where people from DMU and University of Leicester are linking up. Some of them are even making tunes together. Some of them have even gone to release on great record labels. So I'd like to maybe delve into that a little bit more on other podcasts, but just to expand on that as well, just in terms of the positive impacts of maybe what we do. But that's something I'd also like to explore. But yeah, I guess it's the case to wrap up this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed listening. Thank you, Brian, for coming on the show. I'd also like to say that Brian, if he would like to come back, I'd like to explore Brian's experiences a lot more. I know he comes with a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge that we delve into, that we'd like to delve into, rather. But yeah, anything else you'd like to say, Brian?
No, thanks for. I've never experienced making a podcast before. It's been a real positive experience, and it's nice to get to know you
a little bit more.
Yeah. And to see a different side to you that I've never seen before, Nico.
Yeah.
It's almost, I feel like you've opened up a little bit of a vulnerability.
Yes. I guess definitely some of the points that we've spoke about in terms of suicide and mental health and being in the hostel, especially around those periods of maybe like 16 to 21. A lot of people don't know that of me, and especially people at the events as well. So if you come to a B-Swang, people always know me as being quite stern, straight-faced, and I'm just always on work, whereas... again, just the perception of me might be a lot different to what people think, and they might not know about my past life and what has led me to do what I do now.
Yeah,
and this is the whole point of this first podcast. It was meant to be as an introduction. I didn't want it to go into the podcast and speak about a lot of things when people didn't really know about me.
Yeah, and for me, what's really important about this, Nico, is that people are going to listen to this and they're going to see that you've been to some pretty scary places in your life, but you've overcome it. And you'll be that role model to the next generation. And especially now at the moment, with coronavirus still being with us, people having to isolate, you've expressed the way that you've gotten through things. Let's hope that'll influence others.
Very much so. But again, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for listening to Last Night a Rave Saved My Life. Brian and myself wanted to give a special thanks to all the workers at Street Vibe, including Laura and Claire. If you enjoyed this podcast and wanted to hear more, follow me on all the socials at Nico the Beardo. I'm really keen on hearing your feedback, so please do drop me a message at any time. Again, thank you for listening to Last Night a Rave Saved My Life.